Well, Isaac, good to see you again this morning. And we've got our coffee and we've got our Bibles. We're in the Word, getting coffee. It's what we do, right?
That's right.
So today we're talking about making the deeper choice, the opportunity to make a fresh commitment to the Lord. There are certain times and seasons in life. In our context at church right now, we're celebrating people who graduated from college, graduated from high school. That's an important moment in life to reflect and make a commitment to continue to serve the Lord. And whether it's moving to a new city or starting a new job, or in the case of the Israelites, settling into possessing the promised land, we're given opportunities in life to make fresh commitments to the Lord. And so that's what we're going to think about this morning in Joshua chapter 24, verse 14 to the end of the chapter. I'm not going to read it all right now. I'll read a part of it that'll get us started. But what are your initial thoughts on just the idea of taking the opportunity at different seasons in life? Maybe it's the birth of a child or whatever it could be, but the opportunity in life to reflect and continue a commitment or deepen a commitment to focus and serve the Lord.
Yeah, well, first of all, cheers from the road. So no mugs today, just to-go coffee. Out traveling on the road today, but still good to be with you. I heard someone talking about sort of this time in the Israelites' life. Actually, at our church, we're going through the book of Joshua. So that's where this conversation came from. But oftentimes when we look at the promised land, what is the promised land? We can kind of put that off as something in the future. Like think of it as heaven. Heaven is the ultimate promised land. But in reality, the promised land is sort of what we talk about often as God's abundant life for you. And so the promised land is something that you can step into today, that you can live out, you can live in the promised land. Because when the Israelites step into the promised land, which is chronicled in the bulk of the book of Joshua, Joshua leads them through the promised land. It's not a heaven-like environment. There are very much tears and pain and turmoil, trouble, but God is with them, as God tells Joshua in the first chapter of Joshua to be strong and courageous because God is with them. And so it's very much a picture of how we can live our life here on earth, being strong and being courageous because God is with us. And so I love the way you positioned this as an opportunity to declare yourself in your life with God and to reaffirm your commitment at a time in life that is kind of a pivotal point. And I think graduation, whether from high school or college, is definitely one of those points. This is where you're stepping out into your life. Maybe you grew up in the church, maybe you didn't, but this is an opportunity for you to step into your promised land. And for you, it's what better place than graduating high school and graduating college for you to spend time thinking about, what does God want me to do with my life, right? Yeah. Like you're either deciding to go to college or to step into the real world, right? And so one of the major parts of figuring out life in the real world is what your job and your career is going to be. So if you're able to step into that with an idea that God has a specific plan for you, that He designed you in a specific way, and you're able to make those life decisions firmly planted in Him, that's going to set you up to live that abundant life, to experience the promised land that He is designed for you. So as we talk about Joshua and the Israelites stepping into the promised land, I think of it as that front. This is a comparison. This is a way that we can take away and step into our own promised land, which is our abundant life that God has prepared for us and designed us specifically to do.
And in this context, Joshua he's very invested in this group of people. He has been their leader for the last many years. He knows that his time is about finished. This is his last address to the people. He's giving them the opportunity to make a fresh commitment, regardless of who the next leader is, that as a group, they're going to serve the Lord together. And so this is how he puts it. He's got them gathered together. He says, now, therefore, verse 14, fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your father served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. So the gods of the Amorites must not be very powerful, because your God destroyed them and you moved in. You're standing in their land right now. So be careful with that choice. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So Joshua is pleading with them to be faithful to the Lord, to fear the Lord, to have an appropriate reverence and awe over who he is and his holiness, to serve him in sincerity and genuineness, truthfully, and be faithful in it. And, their fathers had not demonstrated that. Their fathers were swayed by other gods along the way in the wilderness. They kept wanting to go back to Egypt. They weren't committed to go forward with the Lord. There were a lot of problems in the past generation. But these people are standing in the promised land right now, and they're about to go into each of their pockets of inheritance that they have been given. They're living out the faithfulness of God, a promise that he made to Abraham well over 400 years earlier. In that context, and in the context of a transition of leadership, will you commit to serve the Lord? And so fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity, and be faithful to the task. That's a pretty good charge, don't you think?
Well, I think we talked specifically about high school and college graduation, but really there's so many pivotal points in our life that we have the opportunity to reaffirm a commitment to God, and to be intentional with that decision. In fact, if you want to get granular with it, Jesus says, choose you each day, right?
Yes.
Every day is an opportunity, regardless of what's going on. Every day is an opportunity for us to decide and to declare, as Joshua does here, that as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He mentions all these other gods from all these other cultures and societies that they're around, that their forefathers got caught up in. We have those in our body, like those other cultures. It's our self, our sin nature is with us every day. So it's like every day when you wake up, you are a foreigner in your own body, so to speak. And so it's like, you got to make those decisions. As for me and my house today, we're going to serve the Lord. And that's me pursuing him, looking for him, what he has planned for my life, depending on him for the strength and courage to do that. Because if I don't make that declaration, the gods of the culture around us, the gods of our own self, our own selfishness, they're there and they're pervasive, and they will take over if we aren't intentional with declaring our pursuit of God.
Yeah, you're right. To not choose is to choose, which is what the point he's making. Hey, if you're not going to serve the Lord, then go all in serving his enemies, because you're going to serve somebody. We're made to worship. We're created to serve somebody. So we're going to do that. And the culture around us, these gods with the little g, you're right. They're always around us. They're always vying for our attention. They're trying to distract us. And unless we're committed, we're going to fail. And that's why Joshua is so serious about driving them into this opportunity to make this commitment. Now, the good news is they immediately respond very positively to what he says. And look at verse 16. Then the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. Who ever heard of that happening? And for it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did these great signs in our sight and preserved us in all the way that we went and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples and the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. So they're committed. They, at least in this moment, they recognize that the Lord is God. He is the one who has provided for them. They're honoring that, and they're making this commitment to serve the Lord. So they actually go all in on making the commitment. However, Joshua has lived this before. He saw their fathers make this commitment, and then it lasted about 5 minutes. As soon as it got hot and they got thirsty, they started complaining and wanting to go back to Egypt. And why did God bring us out here to kill us? They lost it so fast. And so Joshua knows that a commitment is not really a commitment until it's been tested. You know, every Sunday at about 11:55, there are people all around the world making great commitments of how they're going to live for Christ the rest of their lives. And on Monday morning, that gets tested. And by then, some of them have forgotten that they had this conversation with God. And so what Joshua does next, I think, is so powerful in that he tests their commitment. Because here they just made this wonderful commitment to the Lord. And what are the first words out of Joshua's mouth after this? You are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. And so he's like,
thanks for the encouragement, Josh.
Yeah, good job, Josh. Well done. The gift of encouragement. He's immediately talking them out of the commitment they just made. You know, he's like, you can't do this. And so what do you think he's actually saying here when he's challenging their commitment? He just asked them to make it. They made it. And he's like, no, that's baloney.
Well, I think, like you said, there's some history there. He was around with their forefathers and saw it play out exactly the opposite way. But I think it's also just, like, hey, have you thought about this? It's not just a commitment. It's not just, back to the graduation example. It's not just standing in front of your church on a Sunday around June where you dedicate, the next step of your life to God, and then, to your point, walk away and not do it. He's hammering home like, okay, I appreciate you said the right words, but do you mean it?
Right.
Because you need to mean it. It's more than just saying things, it's living it out as well.
And that's a great reminder for leaders that when you're leading people to make a commitment, just having them say the words, don't rush into that. Make sure you're clarifying. We do this when we're sharing the gospel with people. Make sure you clarify the decision you're inviting them to make so it's clear. And Joshua does that. He's like, this God that I'm inviting you to serve is a holy God. He's perfect and righteous. And he's a jealous God. He is jealous for the holiness of his name and his position. And that's why the first commandments that he gave to the children of Israel, these children, when they were children and their parents, the first commandment is have no other gods before me. And this is why Jesus said the most important commandment is to love the Lord your God with everything you have, and then love others as you love yourself.
So like Joshua says, he says that, and then they're like, no, we're serious. And he's like, all right, so you've now said it twice. I've double dared you to make this commitment, and you did it. And they're like, yes, we did. And then he's like, all right, then put away the foreign gods that are among you and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. So they still had, like, what he was talking about, right, all around them. Like, the gods are still, like, they've got these little gods, little g gods,
that they're still carrying around.
They're having this conversation. So that's, I think, another part to your question of why did he kind of zero in on this? Because he makes the declaration. They say, yes, we're in. And he looks around and is like, oh, are you?
Yeah.
For serious in? And they're like, yes, we're for serious in. He's like, all right, then take care of all this crap around here. I'll clean it up.
Yeah. And the other thing he does is he makes them accountable to each other in that moment. He said, okay, you're all in on this. You are witnesses of each other's commitment. So hold each other accountable to this. He institutes that, and they affirm that, yes, we are witnesses. And so he's like, okay, well then you got to get rid of all this stuff. You're going to have to help one another do that, because some of you have idols you don't even know they're idols. And so help each other and keep each other focused on the Lord. And so again, good news, the people come back to Joshua having been challenged and tested in this commitment that they are going to serve the Lord. The Lord our God we will serve. So he's not Joshua's God, he's our God. We will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua nails that down with them. He makes a covenant with the people. There's a ceremony for that. It's a holy promise between them and the Lord that this is how they're going to live. And he wrote it down in the book. He wrote it in the book of the law. That's why we're reading it here. And he took a large stone and set it up under the terebinth tree that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. So every day they go to the sanctuary, and every time they go along this path, they go past this large stone that is also serving as a witness and reminding them that they committed to serve the Lord. So that's also serving as a witness to them. And so Joshua sent the people away, each man to his inheritance.
So real quick, to hammer home that stone thing, that's something I think we talked about in recent weeks of, when you make commitments like this, like build things into your life that are reminders to you. Yes. You mentioned that stone set there was a reminder to them. And so as we kind of move into the next book, we see that this group of Israelites very much held to this, right? They held to this commitment, and they lived it out. And I don't think that was that had nothing to do with that reminder, that daily reminder. They went to the temple every day, and that daily reminder was there that they had made that commitment. So how can you in your life build reminders to not only when God has shown up, but build reminders into your life of what your commitment to him is? And it doesn't have to be a huge rock. It could just be a rock by your front door. That could be a reminder. It's whatever reminds you. Maybe it's a Bible verse that hangs in your house. You've got positioned up there. Maybe it's a work of art or something that reminds you, that tells a tale of God showing up in your life, but also that reminds you that you have committed to this. It might be, go to Hobby Lobby and you can find that verse in Joshua. Oh, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's not a bad one to hang up, right? No. As long as it's a reminder to you and it's not just fades into the background is just another piece of decor. Right. So to work those reminders into your life, because we forget so easily. We forget so easily that we need those reminders to remind us not only what God has done, but what we've said we would do as well.
That is so true. You got to put a stake in the ground to remind yourself of that. As of this date, from now on, this is my commitment. And in your case, you got a guy named Oswald Chambers who's going to remind you of it every morning, because that's your devotional book that you use. I've got a book by Billy Graham that I'm reading this year. Every morning, Billy is reminding me of my commitment to serve the Lord. And there are other ways to do that as well. But yeah, something visual, something tangible that you're gonna see on a regular basis is absolutely important. Well, let me read just what happens here at the end of this. We come into the book of Judges, and the first chapter is kind of reminding us and showing us the challenge that they still had in possessing the land. But in verse 6 of chapter 2, we kind of pick back up where the end of Joshua, where Joshua dismissed the people. It says, when Joshua dismissed the people of Israel went each to his inheritance to take possession of the land. And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. Now, these would be elders that would have been of their generation, because it was only Joshua and Caleb left of the previous generation. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him within the boundaries of his inheritance in Timnath Heres. in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gash. And all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And that tells us where we're headed into the slippery slope of the rest of the book of the Judges. And so these people were faithful to their commitment. Joshua challenged them to make a commitment. They made it. He tested it. They solidified it with a covenant. And then they went home and lived it out for their generation. What they failed to do, as Joshua himself failed to do, is pass it on to the next generation. And that's the sad story of it. You always have to pass it on. You live it out, but then you want to invest it into the next generation as you go. So they were faithful in their day. The people behind them, not so much.
And you know what's interesting? Because I had this thought as you were reading earlier in Joshua. Think about the first generation of Israelites in the desert, right? So they failed to live out in their own life a commitment to God. And you mentioned they turned to whining so easily, and they would falter away, and they had gotten caught up in the gods that surrounded them, right? But one thing they had done, because you mentioned how easy this generation said, oh, why would we do that? We know all these stories about how God saved our people, right? And so the one thing that first generation of desert Israelites had done was tell the stories of God. They had communicated God's involvement in it. They weren't great at living it out in their own lives, but they had communicated to it. And so that is what allowed that second generation then to recognize God and come back to him. So I don't know that we give that first generation of Israelites enough kudos for that, because then the second generation flips it. So they very well live it themselves, but they haven't prepared that third generation then to understand anything. And so I think that's a challenge and reminder to us that we spend a lot of time talking about God loving us and having prepared a life for us to live. And the best thing that we can do is figure out what that is and then go do it, right? It's like we need to add a ... and set up those behind us to know that that's what we're doing. To make sure to tell the story and to make sure that we're training up a generation. So whether it's our kids specifically or just, as Paul had Timothy, if there's just other individuals that were training up behind us, but that we bring a younger generation along with us to not only live their life for God, but then to continue the training up of this is why I'm not just doing it, but this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right, exactly. It's so important.
Back to God. It's not just that I'm living a life that you can look at and say, hey, that was a good life lived. No, it was a God-inspired life that was only done through God, and it's my dependence on God that leads to anything, to make sure that that's clearly communicated. Because you look at Joshua, the whole book of Joshua is Joshua doing what God called him to do. It's like every chapter starts with God told Joshua X, Y, Z. Joshua did X, Y, Z. And then it's next chapter. God told Joshua A, B, C. Joshua did A, B, C. And it's like just faithfulness and obedience, but then no one followed up behind. And so it's a story of two generations. Ideally, we're in a generation that does it both, that faithfully executes God's calling on our life, in our life, but also is able to tell the story, to leave the reminders of what God has done in our life, so that those that come up behind us don't step into a void, but that they're able to follow in and live their own lives for God because they've seen it in us.
Amen. Well said. Well, hopefully, as you've watched this week, friends, maybe this is a significant moment in your life where it's a time and an opportunity to make a fresh commitment that as you go forward, that you and your house will serve the Lord, and you'll share those stories and live it out and pass it on to the next generation. That would certainly be our encouragement. And we hope that this has been helpful to you in that regard. God bless you. Good word, Isaac. Thanks for sharing from the road, and we'll do it again next week.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks.